Hello everyone and welcome to Monstrosities. Today I will be making yet another book. This is the paper I will be using. It is scrapbooking paper. I will be using 2 of the white wood and 1 of the brown with the texture on it. You are going to need 2 thick pieces of cardboard, and I'm using brown cardstock paper. You take your single sheet scrapbooking paper, you flip it upside down, and then you begin tracing the size you need with your cardboard cutout. This is going to be the inlay of your front and back covers. My scrapbook paper is 12 inch by 12 inch, which is 30.4 centimeters by 30.4 centimeters. It's a standard sized sheet, and my cardboard is a perfect half to that sheet. Next up, I will just be using a standard school glue stick and share a generous amount. Then place your textured scrapbooking paper on top of your cutouts. Next, we trace the outside of your cover. This is your 2 sheets. What I'm doing here is I'm tracing the cardboard, and then I'm giving it enough room to have little tabs which you will cut out and then fold over the cover. Again, you just take your school glue stick and share a generous amount and place your cardboard on top. Once it dries a little bit, you can start folding the tabs over the edges. I like to glue on the actual cover and then inside of the tab. I find that that's the best method to kind of get it to stick to each other. As you can see, I'm kind of holding it there because it's not sticking very good. So you do that method until you get all the corners, and then you make 2 covers that look like this. Next, we begin the folding process of all of your cardstock paper. I am just doing single sheets for my book, but you can make signatures, which is like 2 or 3 stacked into one another, which is probably better if you want to have more pages, whilst keeping it looking skinny. All I'm doing there is just crushing my paper, just to keep it a little bit more flat and less poofy. Now we begin marking your spine's strength. Here I am making a few lines, and I will be erasing a few of these because I didn't like where the placement was, and that's why we use pencils and erasers. Now I'm just taking my random sculpting tool with a point, and you're going to be poking holes where you had left your mark. This is the beginning process. I ended up actually stabbing all the way through the cardboard off camera, just because it takes a little bit of elbow grease. It's not like it's so dramatic, but it's hard to film. But I'll see if I can't try to film it in future videos. Now you just take a pin. This is a standard sewing pin. You open up the spines of where you had marked your pencil and start stabbing in those little marks until you get through all of your cardstock. This is probably one of the more time-consuming processes, if not the most satisfying process. Now we begin the long sewing process. So, with your freshly poked holes, you take your sewing needle and making sure you have your waxed thread and stab it through the hole. Then you stab through the hole of the back of your book, pull your hideously long thread all the way through, then you wrap it around and back through your sheet of paper. You will often stab your knot. All you have to do is just pull it all the way through and then making sure that it's all the way tight before going through your next hole. Alright, now that the thread is tight, I am stabbing through my next hole. Again, you pull your grievously long thread all the way through. Stab your needle through the hole in the back of your book. Pull your long thread through. Then you're taking your needle and stabbing it back through the sheet again. Pretty simple. And then you do that until you get to the end of the book. Remember to pull it tight, but not too tight, otherwise you'll rip the paper. Now that we reach the end of the sheet of paper, you take your needle, stab it underneath the long stretched piece of thread there, and pull it until it becomes a knot. Now that it has become a knot, you take your needle again and stab it back through the hole that the knot is covering a little bit. It's a little bit of a struggle, but you can get there. Now that I've pulled it through, it's time to add your second sheet of paper. Making sure that your paper is all lined up. Once you're satisfied that the holes are lining up, again, you stab through the hole that's closest to the one that's coming out. Stab it through. Pull your thread all the way through and go to your second hole and go through that one. Now, once you're through the second hole, you stab under the little rope that's wrapping around the back of your book. You pull your thread through until it kind of looks like a half moon. And once you have it, you stab back through the top sheet's hole. Here I'm demonstrating that you wrap it underneath the thread and then goes back through the hole. I know it's a little hard to see, but I hope it gets the point across. Then you take it back, go through the next hole, pull it through. Again, you wrap your needle underneath this thread on the back of your book, pull it all the way through. And then back through the hole again for your top sheet. Then you do that same process until you get to the very end. Again, wrap your needle underneath the long stretch of thread and then make a knot and then go back through the same hole that you had just came out of. Now we stack the next layer on, making sure your holes are lining up, and then stab through your next closest hole. Now we're going in reverse. You're going to go to your second hole and go through that one. Pull it through. Now we go through your first and second layer of paper. You're going to stick it between them, flip through the pages to get to your needle, grab your needle, flip it around, and stick it back out through the opening, just like this. What that is doing is it's making another hoop, just like your last previous pages. Once all your thread is gathered and your hoop is created, you stab back through the top layer sheet. Alright, let's see if I can't make this as clear as I can. So when you begin working on your fourth sheet, you will be working between pages 2 and 3 and sewing your needles through this opening here. Once you get to your other layers, the top layer, such as page 5, you will be sewing between 3 and 4. And when you get to page 6, you will sew between the pages 4 and 5, and so on. The idea is to keep the thread as flat and level as possible so your pages won't warp. I hope that sort of makes sense. Now it's time to think about the cover. You start with the back of the book and then you finish with the cover. It's at this point that I realized that I messed up my scaling and measuring because I flipped the book upside down. So now I have holes that aren't lining up with the thread on the spine. So it's time to remark and repuncture new holes. Don't fret, this is an easy fix. See how the thread doesn't line up? So as you can see, I already repunctured some new holes that line up with the spine. I also rethreaded and kind of started over, kind of like exactly what I did with the back. I didn't quite film that part just because it was a little awkward. Now that I'm at the end of the book and it's finally done, you tie off the knot, and then you keep the knot on the inside. Try not to push it back through. Now to cover up the mistakes, you take your tacky glue and you fill up the little holes. And since it takes a long time for it to dry, I'm going ahead and put a little pretty on the cover. Now if you have some rhinestones, you put them into the tacky glue before it completely dries up, and then clean up the edges as well so it's not so ugly. And just like that, we fixed a mistake. I also put some tacky glue down the spine just to keep it more secure, just in case. And now we're moving on to the envelope on the inside. I like to keep the envelope the same color as the inlay. That way it kind of just vanishes. All I'm using is some of their trusty school type glue gluing down the edges, folding it until it kind of dries somewhat, then smother the back of it completely in glue, and then place it inside the book. Presto mundo, and it's done. And this is the end of this book tutorial. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell icon if you enjoyed what you see. This is Monstrosities saying bye-bye!